There is a moment a lot of people are having right now. You check home prices, you check mortgage rates, you do the math. Then you just sit there for a second because something feels wrong. Not disappointing, wrong. This is not hard anymore. Hard would mean possible. This feels impossible. And that feeling matters because when enough normal people look at a normal house and feel shut out immediately, you are not looking at a healthy market. You are looking at something broken. But people are still told the same old script. Save more, spend less, be patient, stop complaining, maybe skip the takeout, maybe stop wasting money, maybe lower your standards. But that advice belongs to a different world. Because this world took housing, inflated the price, raised the cost of borrowing, let rent eat the savings, stacked debt on top of adulthood, and then told ordinary people their real problem was not trying hard enough. That is the lie. And that lie is doing more damage than most people realize. Because a house is never just a house. It is stability, privacy, control, a future. And when people lose access to that, they do not just feel broke, they feel delayed, disqualified, left behind, like life is still moving, but only for someone else. And here's the part nobody says clearly enough. That feeling is not irrational. In many cases, it is the correct reaction to a market that has become colder, harder, and far less human than people want to admit. This is the real reason owning a house feels impossible now. And the worst part? Most people still think this is just bad luck. It is not.
For a long time, buying a home felt difficult. Not easy, not cheap, but possible. That difference matters. Possible means if you work long enough, save carefully enough, and stay disciplined enough, you can eventually get there. That used to be the deal. Now, a lot of people do not feel like they are climbing anymore. They feel like they are staring at a wall. And walls change people. Because once a goal stops feeling real, it stops motivating you. It starts humiliating you. That is what housing feels like for a lot of people now. Not just expensive, humiliating. You can do well. You can work hard. You can avoid stupid decisions and still feel nowhere close. That does something to the mind. Because people can handle. What they struggle to handle is a system that keeps asking for effort while removing the reward. That is when frustration starts turning into resentment. And honestly, it makes sense. Because what people are seeing now is not just expensive shelter. They are seeing a life milestone that keeps floating further away, no matter how responsibly they. That changes how people think about adulthood, about relationships, about children, about where to live, about whether building a future even works them. And that is why this topic hits so. Because housing is not a Housing is where the economy becomes personal. Very personal. And this is only the beginning. Because the part most people notice first is, but the price is not the whole trap, not even close.
People. That is true. But it is also too soft, too polite. The real problem is that in many places they stopped making. Detached from wages. Detached from what normal monthly life can actually support. That is the deeper issue. A house is supposed to be expensive, but it is not supposed to feel like it belongs to another species of buyer. And yet, that is exactly how it feels now. A normal person looks at a normal property and gets hit with an abnormal number. Not a stretch, not a sacrifice, an abnormal number. That is when the emotional shift happens. People stop thinking, how can I reach this?
and start thinking, who is this even for? That question is more dangerous than it sounds. Because once enough people start asking that, trust in the system begins to crack. Not loudly, quietly, slowly, but deeply. And that is what makes housing so psychologically heavy. It is not just that prices are high. It is that prices seem to be speaking a different language than ordinary life. Your paycheck says one thing. The listing says another. Your savings say one thing. The market says another. Your effort says one thing. Reality says another. That disconnect wears people down. Because eventually, a person stops feeling like they are building towards something. They start feeling like they are being filtered out. And once housing becomes a filter, the whole dream changes. Because then the market is no longer asking whether you are responsible. It is asking whether you belong. And that question gets ugly fast.
This is where the trap gets cruel. People say, just save more. That sounds simple until you ask the obvious question. From what? After rent? After groceries? After insurance? After utilities? After transportation? After everything else got more expensive too. That is the hidden brutality of modern housing. You are told to prepare for the future while the present is draining you every month. So people do not fail because they do not understand the value of saving. A lot of them fail because the machine takes too much before they ever get the chance to build anything. Rent is not just a bill. For millions of people, rent is the thing that keeps erasing the down payment before it can exist. Every month, money leaves, and with it, time leaves too. That is the part people underestimate. Delay is expensive, very expensive. If saving for a house takes 5 more years because rent keeps swallowing the margin, those are not just 5 years. That is 5 years of higher prices, 5 years of changed rates, 5 years of the target moving again. So the person is not just waiting, they are getting pushed backward while standing still. And after enough time, that starts to feel hopeless. Because you are not building ownership. You are financing your own delay. You are paying to remain outside, month after month, year after year. And the longer that continues, the less housing feels like a goal. The more it starts to feel like a place you were not meant to reach. But rent is only one layer. Because even if someone somehow manages to save, another wall is waiting. And that wall is where a lot of dreams die.
Most people do not lose at the house. They lose at the entrance, the down payment. That is where the fantasy starts collapsing. Because the system presents it like a simple test of discipline, as if saving a large pile of cash in the modern economy is mostly about self-control. That story is convenient. It is also deeply dishonest. Because for many people, this is not a discipline problem. It is a math problem, a brutal one. You pay rent, you pay bills, you pay debt. You try to keep up. You try not to fall behind. And somewhere in the middle of all that, you are supposed to quietly build tens of thousands of dollars for a future that keeps getting more expensive. That is not easy. That is punishing. And punishment changes how people feel about themselves. Because after enough years of trying to save for a goal that never gets closer, people stop feeling patient. They start feeling foolish, like they have been auditioning for adulthood without ever being allowed inside. That feeling is heavier than people admit, because it is not only about the money, it is about what the money represents. Permission, access, legitimacy, the feeling that your life is finally allowed to become stable. And when that permission never seems to arrive, people start making a painful adjustment. They stop dreaming in practical terms. They start shrinking their expectations. Smaller plans, smaller futures, smaller hopes. That may be one of the darkest parts of the whole housing story. Not just that people cannot buy, but that many are slowly learning not to imagine buying at all.
And once a society starts training people to expect less from life, the damage goes far beyond real estate. But even that is still not the full picture. Because before many people ever get close to a mortgage, something else has already happened. They have been weighted down.
This is the part older advice often ignores. Modern adulthood is expensive before housing even begins. Student loans, car payments, credit card balances, medical bills, personal debt, emergency debt. The modern adult often enters the housing market already carrying weight. That matters, because debt does not just take money, it takes margin, it takes flexibility, it takes time, it takes your ability to survive one more increase, one more bad month, one more setback. So when people say, why do they not just buy something smaller? Why do they not just start with whatever they can get? They are asking the wrong question. The better question is, how do you build toward anything when so much of adulthood is already charging you before you arrive? That is what makes this so exhausting. Housing did not become impossible in isolation. It became impossible on top of everything else. And that everything else is where many people break. Not dramatically, quietly, one payment at a time, one delay at a time, one compromise at a time, until eventually, the person who once imagined buying a home starts focusing on something smaller, staying current, avoiding late fees, not falling apart. And that is how a housing crisis hides inside everyday life. It does not always look like collapse. Sometimes it looks like constant adjustment, constant pressure, constant narrowing. And over time, that pressure changes the way people live, the way they choose partners, the way they think about kids, the way they stay in jobs they hate, the way they measure success. Because once housing becomes unreachable, everything around it starts bending too. And then something else enters the story. Something that makes the whole market feel colder. Much colder.
At some point, homes stopped feeling like just homes. They started feeling like inventory. Something to hold, something to flip, something to rent back to the people who could not afford to buy it. That shift matters a lot. Because once a home is seen primarily as a financial asset, the emotional logic changes. A family looks at a house and sees stability. An investor may look at the same house and see yield, cash flow, leverage, opportunity. And when enough buyers think that way, the market changes tone. It gets colder, faster, less human. Because now the ordinary buyer is not just competing with another family. Sometimes they are competing with speed, with scale, with cash, with buyers who do not need the property to make emotional sense, only financial sense. That changes everything. Because a normal person has to think about the monthly payment, the commute, the school district, the repairs, the risk, the future. But money moving through a market does not think that way. It thinks in return. And once shelter becomes part of that game, the people who actually need shelter start losing ground. That is why this no longer feels like a simple affordability problem. It feels like displacement. Like ordinary people are being pushed aside, inside a market that was supposed to be built for living. And that feeling is not paranoia. It is the natural reaction to a system that increasingly treats homes as instruments before it treats them as places. Still, even that did not finish the damage. Because just when buying was already hard, another force hit the market, and that is where pain turned into paralysis.
Many people miss. People do not buy homes with total price alone. They buy them with monthly pain. That is the real price, the monthly pain. And when interest rates rise hard, that pain explodes. Suddenly, the same home costs dramatically more to carry. Not because the house got better, not because the roof changed, not because the kitchen improved, because borrowing got more expensive. That is devastating for first-time buyers. Because the monthly number is what determines whether a dream feels reachable or absurd. And when that monthly number jumps, the market does something strange. It freezes. Sellers stay put because they do not want to give up older, cheaper mortgages. Buyers hesitate because the payment hurts too much. Inventory tightens, movement slows, hope shrinks. That is how bad markets get even worse. Not always with a dramatic crash, sometimes with a long, cold lock. And locks are brutal when you are standing outside, especially if you have already waited, already saved, already sacrificed, already delayed your life to prepare for a moment that still refuses to arrive. That is where housing starts feeling personally insulting. Not just expensive, insulting, because it keeps showing you something you are supposed to want, supposed to chase, supposed to build toward, while making the actual path more painful every year. And if that sounds harsh, look at how people talk about housing now. Not with excitement, not with hope, with exhaustion, with dread, with sarcasm, with the quiet voice people use when they are trying not to admit they may never catch up. And that is exactly why this issue cuts so deep. Because once people stop believing they can enter stable adult life, the psychological damage starts spreading everywhere.
A house is never just a house. That is why this hurts more than people admit. A house means safety. It means control. It means privacy. It means your life has a place to settle. It means you are not at the mercy of someone else's decision every year. It means the future can finally hold still. So when people lose access to that, they do not just feel financially stressed. They feel unstable, exposed, temporary, like adulthood itself has become conditional. That feeling changes behavior. People delay marriage, delay children, delay moving, delay leaving bad jobs, delay taking risks, delay becoming the version of themselves they thought life was moving toward. And the longer that delay lasts, the more corrosive it becomes. Because people can survive struggle better than they can survive permanent uncertainty. Uncertainty wears the mind down. It changes how you see time, how you see yourself, how you measure success. That is why so many people sound numb when they talk about housing. The reaction is not always rage. Sometimes it is emptiness, a flat acceptance that the thing once called normal now belongs to someone else. That may be the real emotional cost of the housing crisis. Not just that people cannot buy, but that many are slowly being trained to stop expecting stability at all. And once that becomes normal, the economy has done something far darker than simply raise prices. It has changed what people believe they are allowed to hope for. And that brings us to the final part, because the deepest damage here is not just financial, it is narrative. It is the story people keep being told. And that story may be the biggest scam of all.
So what is the real scam here? It is not that houses cost money. It is not that markets move. It is not that some cities are expensive. The real scam is the story. The story that says this is still normal. The story that says this is still achievable for anyone willing to be responsible enough. The story that says you just need to budget harder, cut more, want less, wait longer. That story is doing enormous damage because it turns a structural problem into a personal shame. It makes ordinary people blame themselves for a market that changed underneath them. That is the trick, not just the price, the narrative. The narrative that says you are failing an old test inside a new system. A system where shelter became an asset, where rent blocks savings, where debt arrives early, where borrowing punishes late entry, where wages do not catch up fast enough, and where ordinary people are still expected to pretend this is fine. It is not fine, and deep down, almost everyone knows it. That is why owning a house feels impossible now. Not because people got weaker, because the structure got harsher. Not because ambition disappeared, because access did. Not because the dream was too big, because the cost of reaching it was quietly transformed into something many normal people were never meant to survive. So if you've ever looked at home prices, looked at your income, looked at your life, and felt something dark settle in your chest,
That feeling's real. Because for millions of people, the problem is not that they failed the housing market. The problem is that the housing market left them behind. And once you really see that, a lot of the economy starts making a different kind of sense, a colder one.